US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on a visit to Ethiopia. Secretary Blinken met with his Ethiopian counterpart, Demike Mekonnen, in Addis Ababa. The trip is part of a push by Washington to support peace efforts in the country after 2 years of civil war in the Tigray region. But it comes as reports emerge of a massacre carried out by government-aligned forces around the Tigrayan town of Adwa just days before last November's peace deal was signed. DW was able to gain access to the region and hear from survivors, a warning that some people might find the following report upsetting.
Adwa Hagos survived a massacre where more than 300 villagers were killed. It happened just days before a deal was signed, ending the war in Tigray. She had heard rumors of people being killed, so she and her family went into hiding near her house.
When the cattle started making noises, my son and husband left for the house to see what was happening. Then a soldier came and killed them both.
She heard shots being fired. It was an Eritrean soldier, she says. Here's where he shot the door. Inside her hut, she found a bloodbath. Her husband, 70-year-old Berihu Abai, shot dead on the floor, holding his cross under his head. He had been a priest.
I told my daughter, "Your father is dead." We carried him into the living room. There we found my son, also dead. We were shocked. We covered them and cried.
Her 28-year-old son, Gidei Birihu, had been planning to marry soon. Adwa Hagos and her daughter were too scared of the soldiers who were occupying the village. They stayed in the house with the bodies for 4 days.
Then I went to the church to see if I could bury them there, but a high-ranking Eritrean soldier said no. He said it was us who attacked them. I told him we didn't.
She buried her husband and son in her backyard. After 2 months, they were finally moved to the church's graveyard. Since then, Adwa Hagos hasn't slept well. She's overcome with grief.
What did we Tigrayans do? They must be held accountable. It was civilians they killed. They killed the people instead of fighting the soldiers.
According to the administration of the town of Adwa, the soldiers slaughtered more than 300 people in various villages over the course of just 1 week. Witnesses say Eritrean forces took revenge on civilians after suffering a defeat on the battlefield. Adwa Abai, a social worker, recorded 91 people who were killed in the village of Mariam Shevitu over 3 days.
Of the 91 victims, 12 were women. 10 were religious leaders. When we looked at the ages, they were from 2 years to 92 years old.
They killed toddlers, little girls, entire families. Often the soldiers tied their victims' hands before executing them. In one case, both parents were murdered in front of their 5 children.
They killed the mother, named Tsige, and mutilated her breasts with a knife. After they killed her, they put the baby on top of her.
These findings are a testament to the gruesome violence that happened here. Adwa Abai hopes that her records will one day help justice to be served.
For more on that, I'm joined by Swad Noor from Amnesty International, who joins us now from Nairobi. Swad, Eritrean forces are accused of being behind the massacre that we just heard about in that report. Does Amnesty International have evidence to support that?
Thank you so much for having me. Amnesty International has been able to independently verify that all parties to the armed conflict have committed serious human rights violations and abuses, including extrajudicial executions and sexual violence against women and girls. And when I refer to all parties to the conflict, we can confirm that these are Eritrean Defense Forces, Ethiopian Defense Forces, the Tigrayan Forces, and the Amhara Forces.
Now, Ethiopia says that it wants to terminate a United Nations inquiry into abuses committed during the Tigray war. Can you give us more information about that? What would the consequences of a probe like this being terminated be?
Well, we believe that this would seriously undermine the credibility, and it would also be a terrible precedent for the Human Rights Council, as they only renewed the mandate of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia just a few months ago in September. In addition to this, it will only reinforce the culture of impunity, which therefore means that the victims and survivors of gross human rights violations, including sexual violence, from a highly atrocious conflict, will dim the hope for justice, accountability, redress for gross human rights violations in Ethiopia.
Is there any support at all for the victims of this kind of violence?
We believe that, you know, there has to, what the world knows and what we know is the tip of the iceberg. The different things and atrocities that we've been able to document is just the tip of the iceberg. Therefore, further investigations need to be carried out by independent commissions such as the International Commission of Human Rights Experts or the African Commission's Commission of Inquiry to carry out independent investigations for us to know further as to what's going on, because what we know is the tip of the iceberg. From there is when justice and accountability we could proceed from there. But for now, the investigation has to be carried out. And these bodies have faced various restrictions, such as access. So we still don't know. We don't have the full story.
The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is in Ethiopia right now. How could the US help in bringing peace to the region and justice to the victims?
Well, we're pushing for investigation to happen first. That's the first step, because we believe that the peace agreement is a step in the right direction, but the foundation to peace has to be justice and accountability. So we're asking for the different independent mechanisms to be given access into the country, for investigations to be carried out, and then from there we'll be able to have justice and accountability for survivors and victims in Ethiopia.
Swad, just very quickly, if I could ask you, you mentioned the peace deal that was signed last November. What is the situation now? Is there peace?
Well, we are happy that the guns have been silenced, and it's a good way towards a peace. However, there was hope after the peace agreement was signed in November. However, the assaults on civilians we would hope that the assaults on civilians would stop, but there have been reports from locals in the region and those who have returned that these assaults have not stopped to a large extent.
Okay, Swad Noor from Amnesty International, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.